And accordingly, based upon his conduct and based upon the record before this court, recognizing the standards that govern this court's sentencing decisions as set forth in State v. Toohill, I hereby sentence Mr. Kohberger as follows. On count 1, burglary, 10 years fixed, 0 years indeterminate. I also impose a fine of $50,000. Count 2, first-degree murder of Madison Mogen. I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 3, for first-degree murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the victim of the family, or to the family of the victim, pardon me. On count 4, for the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. On count 5, for the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, I sentence the defendant to a fixed term of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a fine of $50,000, and a civil penalty of $5,000 payable to the family of the victim. The sentences on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shall run consecutively to one another. Restitution will be left open for 60 days. Defendant will be required to submit a DNA sample and a right thumbprint impression to the Department of Corrections and comply with the DNA Database Act. I remand the defendant to the custody of the Idaho State Board of Corrections for to be imprisoned in an appropriate facility in execution of the sentence where he will remain until he dies. Though you have waived your right to appeal, you do have a right to file a notice of appeal, and any such appeal must be filed within 42 days of the date of the written judgment, which will be entered shortly hereafter. Though the appeal, you should be aware, may be deemed a violation of the plea agreement, and so I certainly suggest you discuss that with counsel if that is your desire. I ask the media and public present to allow the families to be escorted out first before they leave. Again, thank you to everyone for your stories today. I am strengthened by them, and I am encouraged by your humanity and strength, and God bless you. We're adjourned.
And that is the end of what has been a long and emotional and I think revelatory day for many of the families, the opportunity for them to say what they wanted to say to the man who took the lives of their loved one. I want to bring back NBC's Camila Bernal, MSNBC legal analyst Danny Cevallos, and Catherine Christian. And Camila, I know you've been following from our folks who are in the courtroom what these last minutes have been like. They had hoped to hear something from Bryan Kohberger, who chose not to. The judge who echoed their words in simply saying, your 15 minutes of fame are over. Tell us what was going on inside that courtroom.
Yeah, Bryan Kohberger not speaking and saying, I respectfully decline. That was the only thing we heard from Bryan Kohberger. But these families, they have been waiting for this closure for more than 2.5 years. A lot of the families choosing to do this very differently. They went in order in terms of the charges. So they started with the burglary charges, which is why we heard from the roommates first. They spoke about how just traumatic this has been for them, the panic attacks, the way that they lock their doors, the way they can't sleep at night. One of them speaking through a friend, the other speaking in person, but both of them extremely emotional. The friend, as she read the statement, sobbing at times, the other roommate as well. Then we heard from Maddie's family, and Maddie's family speaking about her and her brightness and what a great person she was. Then we heard from Kaylee Gonzalez's family and all of those family members addressing Bryan Kohberger directly and asking him the questions of why, and, you know, calling him a loser and saying he is a sociopath and a psychopath, and really speaking to him directly about their anger and what they're feeling. We then heard from Xana's family. What was interesting here is Xana's family was the only one to really tell Bryan Kohberger that they forgive him. Xana's mother and her aunt both saying that they forgive Bryan Kohberger, but also saying they don't want to essentially give him the time of day because they want to remember Xana as who she was to them. And even her mom saying she didn't want to share memories of Xana because she did not want to give that to Bryan Kohberger. And then important to point out here, Ethan Chapin's family deciding not to be here, which is why we did not hear about him today. They chose to remember him differently. They did not want to address Bryan Kohberger. And the prosecution putting up their photos during all of this, and you could hear the sobbing in the courtroom from the roommates, from the family members as their photos were posted, and that photo of all of them together hours before the murders was put up in the courtroom as well. You could hear people crying. And then, of course, the judge acknowledging what went on in court today and thanking the family members and the people who spoke for their courage and their strength, but really being very direct to Bryan Kohberger, saying that he was a faceless coward, that he now stands unmasked before him. And then really importantly here as well, saying that we should not give him the time of day, and really we should not be asking the why, because the judge saying when we continue to ask the why, in his opinion, it gives him the power, it gives him that fame that he so desperately wanted. And so the judge saying, you know, I hope he doesn't write a book or doesn't speak out. He wants him to remain in prison and essentially close the door to all of this. Even the judge saying how emotional and how difficult this trial has been, and how difficult it is to understand exactly what happened here. But of course, for these families, the focus on the victims, on the people that they lost and the people they want to remember. So just a very emotional, complicated day for a lot of these family members, but it's the day that they've been waiting for a long time, Chris.
Camila, thank you. Catherine, there's one more moment that I want to note from our folks who were inside the courtroom. And that was when the judge said that to continue to talk about or continue to give attention to Bryan Kohberger just gives him agency. And at that point, Kara Kernodle, who is Xana's mother, was nodding. It was a theme that we heard over and over and over again. And then the judge saying, you know, again, as Camila just said, he hopes he doesn't write a book. He hopes that there's not things written that for clicks. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, he can't make money off of that kind of thing, but he could do, and anyone could take that story with his permission, I assume, and do whatever they wanted to,
and
right?
You may recall, until he died, Charles Manson was always interviewed around the anniversary of Sharon Tate's death. So that could happen. There'll be people out there who will want to interview him, and he could be interviewed. Or he can hopefully remain silent like he's done. But the judge was right, and, you know, to talk about him more and say, why did you do it, just puts the attention on him and not his victims.
What would you say to people who, no ill intent, but to help them understand the families and what that does to them?
Well, you know, I'm not a reporter. I get why you would want to, like, be the first one to speak to him. But it will put the focus on him. And who knows what he would say, what horrible things he would say. He's not going to say, I'm not guilty, because he's just pled guilty. So that will be a problem. We will soon find out whether or not he's going to be willing to speak.
Danny, there was something I want to clarify here, because I think we thought this is over and done. And then the judge said something about a period of time where you could file a notice of appeal. Tell us what that's all about.
Yes, exactly. What the judge was explaining is that if he appeals, he could potentially violate his plea agreement. That's one of the things you give up when you enter into a plea agreement like this, is some of your appellate rights, if not all of them. So that's something that he was admonishing Kohberger about. And I'm certain his lawyers have already explained that to him at length. In all, it's almost 100% certain this sentence will stand. It's a legal sentence. The parties agreed to it. Kohberger will be gone for the rest of his natural life. It's simply, there was little doubt that the judge was going to follow the agreement. And you saw the defense didn't even bother to stand up and say, hey, just follow the agreement. And it highlights that the defense really didn't need to say much. And frankly, from a substantive perspective, the prosecution didn't need to say as much as they did. But perhaps for an emotional, symbolic reason, maybe they did strike the right length and the right tone for the families, for the victims, for them to hear what the prosecutor had to say.
Yeah, the judge, calm, Catherine, measured, but so biting in saying things like his grotesque acts and calling him the worst of the worst. A message that may not be received by Bryan Kohberger. He's shown absolutely no reaction, no emotion, no remorse, as the judge said. But the families needed to hear it.
Families needed to hear it. The public needs to hear that this is a just sentence, the consecutiveness, even fining him. You say, why would you fine him? Because if he has any money, even prison commissary money, that can be a judgment, and he would have to give part of that over for the $50,000 fine.
Well, as the judge said, now he can go away. No one has to talk about him anymore. They have an opportunity to focus on the good things that could possibly come out of the most horrific thing that could ever happen to a family. So we're going to leave you, and thank you, Catherine and Danny, but we want to show you the pictures once again, remembering the University of Idaho students, Ethan and Madison and Xana and Kaylee.